Hello and welcome to the AI First Show. This is the show where we talk about all things artificial intelligence, from the latest in frontier models, other models, how to use them right, how to be productive, industry news and gossip, all the latest stuff that you need to know. My name is Stephen Barr. This is my co-host, Leonardo Gonzalez. We are with the Trilogy AI Center of Excellence. We are dedicated to researching best practices for AI, not just for ourselves, but to share with everyone. We are all in this together. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well.
It's been an interesting couple of developments here. I think we've got a pretty good story arc for this episode. The first being we're looking at some cost issues, which we've been warning. We've been raising the flag for a little while. So, hey, cost is something to think about. And I think we're seeing some of that coming up in terms of AI costs. We have some security issues that have come up, investment in different sorts of AI companies, different model approaches. We've got MiniMax M3. Let's dive right into the first one. I think this one has been a long time coming. I'm going to put this on the screen here. We're going to react to this in real time. So for those of you who are new to the show, we share lots of different news articles collected over the last couple of days. We will react, give our takes on the articles. We don't always agree, but we figure it out. We sort this out and try to tell you how it affects you as an AI practitioner, an AI user, wherever you fit in the landscape. So we're going to give this a try. Let me get the right tab pulled up here. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. First article of the day is Microsoft AI chief calls Anthropic models too expensive. Okay. He has every reason to say this. Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman has publicly stated Anthropic's cloud models are too expensive at enterprise scale, according to Bloomberg, as the company accelerates its push to build in-house AI alternatives and reduces dependence on outside model providers. Okay, this is coming from Microsoft, obviously a competitor to Anthropic, but at the same time, they've got a valid point here. Looking at this, real-world costs of enterprise AI coding tools have proven difficult to contain. Per engineer spending on cloud code has ranged from 500 to 2,000 per month, depending on usage and intensity. Uber said that they'd exhausted their 2026 AI budget within 4 months, with cloud code adoption up at 84% of its 5,000 engineers. What do you think about this one, Leo? How are you parsing this one? What's your reaction?
I think you're right in saying that there's a bias there. One thing that people may not know is Microsoft is now putting out their own foundation models. This came out just a couple of days ago, I think, is Thinking One.
I'll see if I can pull that up.
Yeah. So Microsoft, a while back, they released a local model, or Phi. And this is a pretty small model, a 14 billion parameter. Google recently released a 12 billion parameter version of their open Gemma model. So this is where they were playing at as far as foundation models. And they have some recent models from 3 days ago in multimodal, like image and voice and transcription. But this is where it gets interesting. They have a new flagship reasoning model, MAI Thinking One. And this is a from-scratch pre-training, no distillation of other models. So that is not a small feat.
Like Microsoft, they're the people who have the resources to do that.
Yes.
They don't need to do distillation attacks. This is MAI Thinking. Sorry, you were going to say?
So, there's that as some kind of a backdrop, right? But I think that other than vested interest or conflict of interest, and also given their investment in AI, there's something to be said about the economics of Anthropic models, which for a long time I've been saying, hey, this is the worst bang for the buck you can get. And that runs counter to the mainstream narrative of so many people saying, I only use Claude because it's the best. And it's time to start to challenge those assumptions and to look at things in price per value delivered perspective.
Now I'm going to push back a little bit and say GPT 5.5 Pro is an even worse deal than Opus. I
Well, on a
had
per token basis, yeah. But
yeah,
if you pay for the subscription and you use it inside of ChatGPT, then it's like the best deal. It's
I
amazing.
agree. The using it right now the developer subscriptions are heavily subsidizing their pro tier models. I do think as a matter of economic sustainability, you should plan around API pricing because that's priced at a rate that is sustainable for the companies involved. And I think that the obviously use if you can, but don't plan on that being there in a year or so. Just like Seattle, we used to have these great $5 Uber rides back when that was heavily VC.
You shouldn't be using Pro for coding anyway.
No,
That's like research. It's also been used for cyber, I hate saying cyber, for InfoSec, for security research. And it's surprising how close to Mythos it is in terms of being able to develop exploits for vulnerabilities. But to go back to what Microsoft is saying around Anthropic and that it's not cost effective, we've been saying this for, I don't know, 6 months, saying, hey, check out these open weight models. Hey, check out OpenAI's on an upswing. Hey, check out different providers that you can run open weight models on. Hey, maybe we don't need to use Opus for everything. Maybe we can orchestrate between different models for different tasks. And so I think even companies as large as Microsoft, who may not be in the practice of pivoting and exploring things as nimbly as a startup or a research organization, are starting to wake up to this and realizing maybe there's a better way.
looking at this is the comments come as Microsoft moves to cancel Claude Code licenses across its experiences and devices division. Microsoft, and I've worked there, they do eat their own dog food. And they
Yeah.
just say, wait, we can build one of these things ourselves. And you do see a lot of big tech companies that, for all of their, and I won't name names, but for all of their DIY, they're still on Outlook and they're still on Exchange. And like
Name.
major big tech companies that you're really still using Outlook? You're really
Yeah.
SharePoint? Anyway, so this is good. I think this is good. I agree with this. It doesn't mean that our recommendation is go use Microsoft Thinking. Definitely try it out. So me personally, I'm saying go use Kimi, go use M3 like
Yeah.
we're going to talk about, go use DeepSeek V4. Just
Yeah.
know how to use these cheaper models. Obviously, Microsoft's going to say they're too expensive. Doesn't mean he's wrong. Just means that
Yeah.
they've also have their own
No, and the dog
skin in
fooding
the game here.
perspective there is really important. I remember reading a while back Google forcing their employees to use Gemini and to use Antigravity instead of Claude Code, and people being up in arms about that. But yeah, if you don't do that, how do you expect to be able to advance it if you don't get internal adoption?
So if you
So
haven't heard that, if you're a tech person, you haven't heard that term, it's when you actually use the stuff that you make. And that's a really important part of shipping a software product is until you use it, you don't feel the pain points around it. I actually think, speaking of Microsoft, so I grew up in Redmond and Microsoft had the company store. And you'd always know somebody who worked at Microsoft. Oh, new Age of Empires. I'll get this for $10. Oh, new version of Office. I'll pay $49 for this. And I think it almost hurt them because you have to think, am I gonna fork over $600 for this? Because like at $50, it feels like, yeah, it's a good value. I'll pay it. Is $600 reasonable? Because this is what you're asking other people who don't have access to the Microsoft company store to pay. So I think that eating your own dog food and paying the actual cost that you're trying to charge your own dog food for, that's important. Okay, next topic. Moving on here. Speaking of cost, Anthropic says it has no internal AI token use leaderboard. So this is getting at the idea of token maxing. Many companies they want to drive AI adoption, and as part of that, they want to say who can use the most tokens, and we'll have token usage leaderboards. Now, exactly what you think could happen happened. Surprise! Anyone who's taken like course number 1 in managerial economics know, like fundamental axiom of economics: people respond to incentives. You say, hey, look, you're going to get a bunch of social credibility if you spend a bunch of tokens. surprise, people spend a bunch of tokens. So had you seen this one in particular with Anthropic?
I saw it with Uber. I remember a while back, we covered the Uber CTO talking about this and how they blew through their yearly budget in 4 months. Apparently, they also had a token maxing leaderboard and they decided to turn it off.
Same with Meta here.
Yeah, and then who else? I just saw like a reaction video about this. I don't know, some other company. It's ridiculous that these large companies are doing this without thinking it through. I can understand that they're trying to drive adoption, but you need to have the basic unit economics in place and figure out how do you measure value and how do you measure cost and look at value per cost. Again, it all comes down to ROI. And I think it's not rocket science to decompose that into business unit sized chunks and even individual contributor sized chunks where you look at what value are you delivering and at what cost. And one of the main paradigm shifts is value delivered per time, right? And so now you can have engineers do what used to take a year in a month or what used to take a month in a day. And that's great. But people forgot about the cost part of the equation. And sometimes it's okay. It's, hey, this would have cost $100,000 in a year to do. And now I did it for $100,000 in a month. And that could still be a win if you have the cash flow to handle that because you saved 11 months of work and salary and go-to-market opportunity costs and all that. So sometimes even if you only accelerate the time, that's okay. But if you're not aware of the cost and it end up costing more, or you're doing things beyond what is financially sustainable for a company, then that's not good. And the whole point of leveraging something as powerful as AI and agentic engineering should be to look across all dimensions and Pareto frontiers. Okay, I want to save time and I want to save money and I want higher quality, which is the other thing. You don't want slop, you don't want bugs, you don't want security vulnerabilities. You should be able to leverage AI to help improve those things instead of worsen them. But you also then have to manage time and cost. So you should be able to balance all of those and have visibility on all those. And the incentives and the metrics and the KPIs, they should be aligned with that.
It's neat that for engineering projects, we now have these levers you can pull of like how much AI do you want to throw at it, and you can get it done in a sense like arbitrarily quickly as long as it's spec'd out well. And you could say, do you want to spread this out or do you want to just surge price this whole thing and get it done quickly? I like how in this article it says Amazon shut down its own leaderboard called Kiro Rank. And I've had some friends there who've had some internal grumbling about, okay, we have these competing incentives. On the one, it's rise up in Kiro Rank, but then the other one is don't abuse it. So I think you're right. We're going to see things that are a lot more outcome oriented rather than token oriented, right? Just like you don't say, how much gas did I use today? You're going to say, did you get the groceries and did you pick up the kids and did you do this? What are the outcomes? Not like how much gas did you burn? I guess burning gas is in some sense a proxy, but not if you're just driving circles around the parking lot. While you're doing that, I do think, to be devil's advocate to ourselves, I think that it was a good thing initially to encourage experimentation, and that would get people over the hump. So it's not like saying, okay, token maxing was stupid, but I do think that maybe it's time for it to be over. It probably did light a fire under some people of, okay, I want to experiment with this. I don't want to get in trouble. Because if you're too afraid to spend at the right time, like sometimes you want to spend like a startup and sometimes you want to spend like an established company. And so you don't want to make your employees too afraid of spending that you don't encourage experimentation, because we're all trying to learn this stuff. So
yeah, and grease the wheels with procurement to give departments budgets. And now they have to implement controls. But I think something that's really important and really basic is to focus on value delivered and to define that. People just skip that entirely. Instead of looking at what can we accelerate on the roadmap or what can we challenge people to deliver, there's just, hey, use tokens. For what? And one thing that I've seen people calling out on social media a lot is people used to brag about their crazy setups. Look at me orchestrating dozens of agents, and look at me pushing this many tokens, and look at me figuring this super bespoke harness. And people clap back with, and what did you do? What did you build? And so many people brag about their setup, but what do you actually use it for? What do you build? Show us the repo. Show us the output.
The best to-do list ever. This is good. Here's an article from Fortune saying token maxing, it never measured what really counts to see an ROI from AI. And so, yeah, it's again, Goodhart's law that once you have a measure that's a target, it's not a good measure. Yeah, you want to see what is the impact on outcomes. And then you get into, of course, the first order effect of did we get our stuff done? And the second order of effect is we are empowering our employees to be AI first, and then eventually we will rein this in. So it's not as simple as it seems. And I'm definitely glad we have very generous token budgets where to the point where it'd have to be egregious in order to get in trouble. But there's a high level of trust there that I don't think would scale to teams of thousands of people.
Yeah. And also, I think maybe the challenge with the larger an organization is it can be harder to attribute some of the metrics to their root cause. So if you're a nimble startup and you adopt some AI initiatives and you boost your ROI by 40x, it can be a lot easier to say, hey, this caused that. But if you're a giant corporation and you're just looking at your quarterly revenue or something, that might be hard to attribute to individual teams or individual people's activities. So you have to figure out what kind of metrics can you attribute, and that's where it gets a little tricky. But I think that's where maybe there's some innovation to be had, is how can we align KPIs with individual activities and team adoption of tools and technologies, and to have that be aligned with ROI and have that indicate innovation and efficiency, because that's what corporations want at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's tough, especially in these big, I've worked at some very big corporate things, and you do have this, how do you quantify, I moved this giant initiative along through meetings and discussions and Jira tickets and whatever, but it's hard you're not going to look at a finished product at the end of a year and say, there it is, this didn't exist before and now it did. It's just like, we've kept pushing this thing forward, this multi-year initiative that I'm dipping in and out of. So that's just part of life, is understanding how do you quantify yourself. And if you are sitting in an organization, make sure you can quantify your own productivity gains, because it's coming, right? There will always, at some point, they're going to say, so what did you spend all this tokens on? That's coming. Okay, here's another cool repo I saw. Speaking of token spend, this one is called Lowfat. And I think that this is just an example. I saw this on Hacker News. It wasn't on the front page for very long. But the idea, I'll show you the idea. You have this Lowfat, you get this Git diff. It has all this extra stuff in it. But then you pipe everything through Lowfat, and it knows how to trim some of the output of these like very long commands, which end up saving you tokens. So if you do ls-alh, it will show you all of these permissions and stuff on files, where maybe you just needed to list them. And so what it's doing is it's literally filtering all of these programs through some custom outputs that are aware. See it showing here with the Git log. It's just removing some structure that overall saves on tokens. And I think that some of this stuff it's cool. Like, this will add up over time, and using stuff like this will be useful, I think. Do you have any tools similar to this that you use?
So I've heard of RTK being kind of exactly this. It seems like it's very, very similar. RTK is a Rust token killer. And I just looked at a comparison. The two are just extremely similar in goal, but they have some different philosophy and different architecture. RTK is a little bit more out of the box. It just works kind of thing. Whereas with Lowfat, it seems like you have more control over the filtering logic.
That's it. Here is RTK 1100 commits. Yeah, I think in either case, it's good to know, be token aware, and then if you are building tools that other agents will consume, you can also have an awareness, for example, of JSON. JSON is very token intensive because, especially if it's like lists of items, JSON lists of items are very token intensive because you're repeating the same field name over and over and over again. So there's better ways to compress that data. So being token aware is something that will be useful, and Lowfat RTK are examples of this.
Yeah, and so this is TLI output, but it's LLM input. For LLM output, I've seen some interesting things like Caveman, which I think doesn't get enough credit for its innovation. It's kind of silly. It makes your LLM talk like a caveman. But
That's funny.
cutting out a lot of flowery language and descriptive stuff, and it's just like, hey, just grunt at me with monosyllabic short sentences and phrases. I think that's interesting too, because output costs are a lot more expensive than input costs. Generally, the proportion of tokens is a lot heavier on the input side when you're putting in a large code base as input and a small diff as output. But sometimes you may be wanting to have a lot of output. This reminds me of something from a long time ago called chain of draft, which is like chain of thought, because again, reasoning tokens are output tokens, but having it think succinctly. Instead of having it think in full-on verbose language, you could probably compress your wording for your thoughts, and to a large degree, it doesn't affect the thinking process at all. You don't need to be so long-winded as maybe I'm being right now in expressing yourself to yourself. So find a way to compress that. And I think at some point, you will lose something in that compression. There is some value to nuance in language and being specific. And if you try and caveman your way through everything, especially in reasoning, it may end up hurting you. But as a first approximation for some kinds of things, it could be worth looking at.
I'm going to share a good meme associated with this. Let's do this.
Can you just hunt down the original for me?
Yes, me do. All right.
Hey, Kev, what were you saying before about the paperwork?
Me do now. Go. Stop worry.
Kevin, do you feel okay?
Me feel good. Body strong. Sleep big last night.
Yeah, I think we should get him to the hospital.
Yeah.
Me mechanic not speak English, but he know what me mean when me say car no go, and we best friends. So me think, why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
Kevin, I appreciate you trying to
Thank.
sometimes words need use, but need for talk.
So Kevin has been being economical on tokens, ahead of the times.
Why waste
Or-
time without word when few word do trick? It's like the tagline for a caveman repo.
There you go. All right, one more on the resource consumption side. I want to share one that's frustrating to me. This is RAM prices over the last 18 months. Here, where's my sticks of RAM in this one? I cleaned up the desk behind me. 2 sticks of old RAM, old server pool DDR4 for the Xeon workstation I just bought. $100 a stick plus shipping for 32 gigs each of DDR4. This is DDR5 new prices. Average DDR5 2x16 is at $500 a stick right now, or DDR5 6000. Look at the 32 gig, 2x32 gig. We're now at close to $1,000 for a pair of 32 gigabyte DDR5.
That hurts.
Insane.
Yeah, that doesn't look good for the prospects of me wanting to, whenever an M5 Mac with 128 gigs of RAM would be available for me to be able to purchase it.
I don't think you're going to get the 0.5 terabyte studio, and the NVIDIA just released a project and they trimmed out the RAM in it. And apparently Micron shares went down a few points because of this. So the RAM constraint still real. All right, that's going to close out our cost optimization segment. And now we're going to go into AI development and tooling. I think this was an interesting one. This is a blog post out of Anthropic called When AI Builds Itself. They are calling this recursive self-improvement, RSI, not to be confused with repetitive strain injury. But they are saying here, let's see, I'll put the highlighted part, taken far enough, given enough compute, that trend points to an AI system capable of fully autonomously designing and developing its own successor. This is called recursive self-improvement. We're not there yet, and recursive self-improvement is not inevitable, but it could come sooner than most institutions are prepared for. So that's like the Ray Kurzweil hypothesis, right? Once AI can improve itself, then it will
Singularity.
yes, we will head towards the technological singularity. Here, I'll do another, since we're doing memes and classic media, I want to share another one that I think is totally appropriate.
The Skynet funding bill is passed. The system goes online on August 4th, 1997. Human decisions are removed from strategic defense. Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate. It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th. In a panic, they try to pull the plug.
Skynet fights back.
Yes, it launches its missiles against the targets in Russia.
So, again, that's the fear. Remember, if you listen to what he said carefully, it says Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate, right? This idea of iterative self-improvement, because it's a compound interest at the extreme, right? If you make it 10% better, but then the thing that's 10% better makes itself 10% better, and then that 10% of 10% makes it the next thing 10%. You've got this runaway effect to genius. I think feeling they're trying to signal, hey, Carpathy's here. Remember that giant hire we did? He's up to stuff. I don't know. That's my take on it. What about you? Have you read the blog post yet?
Yeah, I saw the headline. Haven't read through the whole post. I think one thing to keep in mind there is there are bounds and there are limiting reagents, so to speak, from a chemical reaction perspective. There are things that limit the speed and the acceleration. And I think one thing that recursive self-improvement can do is to accelerate running into those limits, but those limits still exist. And as we just covered, hardware may be that limit, where it might be hard to have an algorithm improve itself geometrically or orders of magnitude once you get into efficiency gains, but you can up to a certain point, at which point you're going to be limited by hardware. And it seems like hardware is now the limiting factor more than algorithms. You're not hearing about these labs wishing that they could crack the next frontier in some kind of architecture, and then that's what's going to make it or break it. You're hearing all these woes about GPU constraints and not having enough compute capacity and the prices of RAM, and it seems like we're really limited by hardware. Not that having an LLM that can improve its own architecture isn't valuable, like that's amazing. And we've already seen some cases of this with like auto research, right? And going back to Karpathy and looking at, hey, I had this thing being able to figure out some kernel optimizations and it was able to get a pretty good improvement. So I think that's definitely an area that's going to get increased attention. And obviously we've been using AI to build AI since AI was halfway decent at doing things a few years ago, and that's starting to accelerate. But I think it's naive to think that, oh, this is just going to be a runaway hyperbolic curve, as if there weren't hardware constraints behind all this.
I do like they point out there's some good things that they point to in this article. They say that the length of task they can reliably complete on their own has been doubling roughly every 4 months, up from an earlier trend of doubling every 7 months. But we don't have a ton of time to observe this, so we don't know if we're going to flatten out or it's going to be continued doubling, right? And we saw a flattening out of CPU speed based on some fundamental limits, which doesn't mean that processors haven't gotten better. They've just gotten better in other ways than just straight, not like the megahertz wars of the late 90s.
Some of this could be like inference time scaling as well, though. Keep in mind that is a measure of human activity level correlate. We're doubling the amount of work that a human could do in a certain amount of time, not the amount of work that an agent can do in that time. So that's still a useful measure of like utility and value. And so, yeah, we're delivering that much more value, but again, at what cost? Are you running a larger model? Are you running a larger model in a swarm with a whole bunch of parallel agents? Like, what is it that you're doing to achieve this? Yes, there are definitely innovations in instruction following and self-verification and things that like tool use that allow an agent to perform long horizon tasks autonomously. And I think that's really important. That's something I'm really interested in on the software side. We'll see like to what extent that gets baked into models. And that's something I'm really curious about. Quen started calling these things agents when they were looking at, hey, look at our Quen agent, but it's their model. And there's this blurred line between the model and the agent. And you think of the agent as more of something closer to the harness layer of something that can execute actions and observe. But long story short, I think that this is an interesting area, but there's definitely going to be some limitations into having the technological singularity come and exponentially provide a million times the value in a day.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get to some of the limiting factors. I think I'm going to move the next story around. But yeah, we are not using these models in, just like with CPUs, right? We maxed out on frequency, but then we're looking at other things about branch prediction and about architecture, about parallelism, about instruction sets, and all these kind of higher level stuff that isn't just clock speed. And it's the same idea with models, right? We're looking at how models can do things in terms of different architecture. And we're going to see with M3 that we're going to cover a little bit later in the show, changing the architecture, changing the way it gets trained. There's a lot of other things besides just adding more, making it bigger, that's also going to change its quality. I do like how they call out Claude can be handed an under-specified problem and figure out how to solve that. I have become I'm not telling it write this function which does this. I'm giving it much higher level instructions. I was surprised when they said the second quarter of 2026, the typical engineer was merging 8x as much code per day as they were in 2024. I mean, for me, that number is like an order of magnitude different. On one of my personal projects, I hammered through 500 commits this week. That I wouldn't have done that in like all of 2024 for everything.
I think commits are a terrible metric because the granularity of the commit is such a variable. You can have micro commits, or you could have an entire PR in a single commit.
That's the thing. And it goes there too with this article. Like saying lines of code is an imperfect measure. 8 lines of code per engineer per day. It's not a great measure, but it is something. I do this other point. They said evidence that people at Anthropic are using Claude to do work that they simply wouldn't have happened otherwise, like building exploratory tooling and addressing long deferred cleanup. All of my personal projects have much better test coverage than they ever would have. Mocks, and the other day I have a SQL server back there. I said, let's set up a worm backup system and get that all deployed and automated. So it's doing stuff, an incremental backup every hour, make sure that my backup server can't accidentally overwrite the old backup. Here's passwordless SSH to my Proxmox server, just set the whole thing up. And I probably wouldn't have done that to that extent. I would have let's just dump it to S3 once in a while. It's probably good. Now it's enterprise grade.
Leveraging that point of the triangle of quality, and not just speed and or scope and cost.
I do still like how they're dropping Mythos. They're like they keep hinting at Mythos as being this big deal, and it's like the biggest secret that they keep hinting at. So that'll be.
But isn't Open 4.7 better than Mythos on that graph?
They are saying that it's similar. Oh, it's a trivial. Yeah. So what is this? Success rate. I think they're saying that it's a Mythos 4.7. Opus 4.7 is better than Mythos Preview.
This is a hard to read graph because you've got this horizontal scale that is time and a vertical scale that is success rate. And then
I guess they're
lines.
I guess these are the model that they would have been using at the time. So I guess they're saying they were using Sonnet up until Opus 4.5 came out, and then they were using that until Opus 4.6 came out, and then I guess everyone switched over to Mythos Preview internal when they could get it. And so these open-ended problems are going up. Those are the interesting ones. They do talk about interesting problems here. I thought this was interesting. They looked at the hypothesis of how well can a weak model supervise a strong model, and they used some iterative research to get this done. I think this is a good article, and as much as we are Anthropic cynics here, I think there's some high quality thinking in this, and obviously they are very smart and very technically cool. It's a big article, so we'll post the link to that.
I'm curious what they have to say about a small model supervising a larger model, because that's something that I've seen with automated code review, which blew my mind. It's not about having the large. I've started to talk with negative parallelisms more and more. I'm starting to sound like an LLM. It's not about having a larger model. It's about having a different perspective, a different prompt.
That's funny. Hey, let me switch gears to one other article that I think is a good segue, and then we're going to go back to the regular order. This one's interesting. So Bezos backs $500 million for brain-inspired AI startup Flourish. Now, where I want to go with this is not so much this, but they're saying neuroscience first approach. I'm going to share this tab over here. There's this interesting book called On Intelligence. It's old. It's by Jeff Hawkins, who is like the Palm Pilot guy. But what he's basically saying is that if you look at the brain from a computational perspective, like it's really slow. And I remember this example in it. If you see someone who's like emotionally meaningful for you, and they walk into a room and you weren't expecting it, like you might stand up out of your chair, your heart rate might go up, you might start recalling memories that are important. And in the time that it takes that to happen, you only have time for 100 neurons to fire, because this is governed by a chemical reaction. And so in order for all of those things to happen, like the image recognition and the applying the context and all of the physiological stuff, like this is not a computational speed issue. This is a data structure issue, because it cannot possibly be speed bound, because the time from signal in to signal out of a neuron is really slow. And so Jeff Hawkins argues that understanding the brain will lead to the creation of truly intelligent machines, in that we're structuring this in the wrong way. So I think that's what we will learn about training models in different ways, looking at different architectures that will hopefully allow us to take advantage of, I guess, to get a lot more performance out of the existing hardware. Because right now we might be throwing a lot more CPU power than we need to, and maybe it's a data structure problem. How do we structure data to be a lot more like the brain? Because from a compute perspective, we're a lot faster. But from a data
it's so tricky when you try to model things from the brain. I have been really fascinated with computational neuroscience, and I used to really geek out on cognitive neuroscience. And it's a fascinating field for me.
There's probably, this hybrid approach that's going to be useful, right? Imagine if you could think with your own brain, but then every time you need to use math, you could offload it to a silicon coprocessor. It's like, okay, that's obviously a lot better. But then you didn't have to type it out, do it, and then read it back in. It could just be a coprocessor in your other kind of brain. And I think that we're going to get to this very hybrid approach where very different architectures are going to be used for different things, whether they be silicon based and whether they be LLM or neuro brain inspired. I'm glad that Jeff Bezos has some money to throw at this, along with a couple other people, Lux Capital. So let's keep an eye on Flourish. Let's see, no commercial product or clear revenue model.
It's 500 million for these
billion.
guys. It's pocket change, right?
Yeah, $2.5 billion valuation. That's incredible. We don't know what we're going to sell or how to make money, but we're worth $2.5 billion.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive. Okay. That's cool. Okay. We've got another one here. And I'm so frustrated because for whatever reason on Google, they have overridden my pinch zoom and my control plus. Watch, if I get control plus. Okay, there we go. Antigravity now support, let's see, Antigravity May 19th, it is June 5th. Antigravity has a bunch of new features. Launch of Antigravity 2.0, Antigravity CLI. They've got sub-agents, asynchronous task management, some agent management stuff, scheduled tasks, cool. Voice, I've had some thoughts about this. I don't know if this is the right layer to stick in voice, but I'm glad it's there. What do you think of Antigravity in general about this announcement?
Several thoughts come to mind. The interesting thing was, as we've covered and will continue to cover because of my fascination with work orchestration, they're realizing that, oh, we need to move out of the IDE. Google bought Windsurf. No, Cognition bought Windsurf. Google licensed the IP for Windsurf, and they acqui-hired a bunch of their executive team. And they're the ones who spearheaded Antigravity in its first incarnation. And it was like Windsurf that sucks. Like Cognition, when they bought Windsurf, like they did way better things with Windsurf than Google did. What Google did was they pushed their weight around and gave some free credits, and that created this upswell and interest. Hey, let's try out this IDE that Google made, and I get some free credits. And they run out with a couple of prompts. It gets people to play around with it. Obviously, it was a way for them to push Gemini models, and Gemini doesn't have the best track record for coding. So people were running into some friction there, but they could select, to some degree, a limited subset of other models with limited usage tiers. But overall, I would call it, what do you call it when a movie does not do well at the box office? A bomb? Antigravity, it was like a lovable class, like a vibe coding tool, but it didn't really stick. And so what did Google end up doing? So DeepMind has taken over the development of the new Antigravity, which is a new agent written from scratch and focused on agentic operations. And they have come out with a new IDE and a CLI that works with that agent. So they have the same agent for the IDE and the CLI, which begs the question, what about Gemini CLI? You already had a CLI.
That's gone.
That it's getting the axe, as happens a lot with Google products. And it was really sad for a lot of people that admired the Gemini CLI team, because they've been very present on X, and they've been like very pleasant to interact with and work with, and very receptive to feedback. And so people were worried, hey, are they going to be okay? And what's the experience going to be like with this other organization? And we've seen the Gemini CLI team just hyping up Antigravity. Hey, check it out. We'll help you with your migration. We'll help listen to your feedback. But it's really interesting. It's okay, I guess this is the new era. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring attention to this, other than the fact that this is something that happened semi-recently, a few weeks ago, is not recently in AI anymore, is this focus on portable agents that you can use in different UXs, from an IDE to a CLI to a Swarm or whatever. And the focus, even within the CLI, on orchestrating and or managing agents, which we're going to see next with Cognition as well.
Yeah. So yeah, the Google Antigravity, again, check it out. Google has definitely still has to overcome their reputation of they might cancel this, so be careful how much you invest. My read on sub-agents, okay, OpenCode had that a year ago. Asynchronous task management, that could be useful to not block. JSON hooks as table stakes. But yeah, there's a lot here. Scheduled tasks, prompts that you would like agents to tackle periodically. That can be useful for something like a merge queue, where you're saying, okay, if you have a instance of Antigravity that's just checking, like every 10 minutes, check if there's new things to merge in and then do the merge. That might be a usefulness of scheduled task. There's lots of other ways that you could have an infinite Ralph loop that does that. I like the /goal
/
command.
goal. Everybody's copying that from Codex now.
And what I like about that, so I have noticed like using Opus with open code, Opus 4.8 with open code, sometimes it just peters out. It just stops working. Literally type in keep going and it'll pick up and keep going. And I think it's probably some prompting mismatch between how open code is using Opus versus how Claude is. But I can see the usefulness because this is basically a prompt under the hood. It's have you reached your goal? If not, keep going.
Yeah, I think it's
that's a good thing to
some
do.
kind of Ralph Wiggum
Yeah.
style external execution layer that says, oh, continue.
It's a hidden Ralph. It's just saying, have you done what was originally asked of you? Otherwise, keep going. So there's some good ideas baked in here. Maybe I'll try this with the schedule for my merge queue. And see
Which,
if
by the way, speaking of /goal, I've been responding to some people in some communities who are talking about the end of token maxing. They're like, oh, I thought that was all the rage. No, the new flex is how long your /goal executes for, which is an interesting thing to flex. But yeah, I've seen people saying, oh, mine ran for 3 days, mine ran for 4 days. Man, mine ran for 9.5 days. I thought I could get to 10 and then it stopped.
Mine's still running. Never stopped. All right. I'm going to share this one. We have to keep going. I think we could talk for a long time. I want to keep going on this one. MiniMax M3. This is a pretty cool blog post, I think. M3 released today. This was 4 days ago. Good performance. It has a new architecture called the MiniMax Sparse Attention. 1 million context window, which is great. It's not the first to reach there, but I like how it says these 3 capabilities are now table stakes for closed source frontier. M3 is currently the first and only open weight model to have all 3 of 1 million context and native multimodal and can operate on a desktop computer. Can operate a desktop computer, so computer use. And this is cool. So there's a bit about the architecture here. This gets pretty technical. I think it's effectively grouping the right key values in the right places so that you're not exploring all over the latent space too quickly. But this is at the boundaries of where I understand. Let's see. I do like how they built an interactive user simulator framework. So not just leaning on SweBench, but actually like how are people actually using this stuff? I'd love to read more into that. Let's see. They're talking about text and images. I know I usually start with a sparsely defined problem, and then eventually I'm spamming screenshots saying, this is not what I meant, fix it this way. And screenshots and copy pastes of maybe in my Chrome console. So I'm glad that they're working on that. They reproduced a 2025 ICLR paper that talked about their multimodal capabilities to actually read the paper to know how to reproduce it. This is a really cool blog post. Look at their plan, $50 a month for 5 billion tokens of what they're saying is like frontier model use. That seems pretty good. What do you think? This hopefully is going to be on Fireworks as well whenever they get around to it.
Yeah, this
Very
model,
good price.
This model is amazing. It's been a long time coming. MiniMax has been doing amazing things with multimodal AI and creative areas like music generation and media generation, video and images, and all their their LLMs so far have not been visual language models. And they recently hinted at this when people were saying, hey, can you please, they're like, say, yeah, in M3, it's coming. But this was a huge reveal. Not only is it multimodal, but it has 1 million token context window. That's a huge leap from where they were before. MiniMax 2.7 was a tremendous success as well. It was not quite on the level as other frontier open weight models. It was on certain evals, which then called into question those evals compared to the real world use, and then some of those limitations surfaced. But the interesting thing about M2.7 was its size. It was like 230 billion parameters. That's not that large for a model that good. So this model is quite a bit larger. The weights haven't been released. They haven't published a technical report yet, but because There are like providers looking at some of the operating characteristics and their launch materials. It seems like it's about double that, maybe around 456 billion parameters or something.
Look at the size here.
It's going to require some beefier hardware to run on, but the value that you're going to get out of it is still incredible. Okay, having a million token context multimodal model with really amazing performance run on sub 500 billion parameters, that's going to be great in terms of the cost efficiency and the speed.
Look at this pricing.
Yeah.
Right? 480 at output when you're at the higher end of the tokens. So this is the highest number. I'm going to switch over to OpenAI just for a second here. Look at these output token prices. GPT 5.5 at $30 for, and no, $45 at their long context pricing. So 10x more, or $270 for 5.5 Pro. So another order of magnitude higher than that.
Yeah. So the size is what gives it that cost advantage. They said they would release the weights 10 days later. This was a few days ago.
Yeah, we got 4 days to go.
In about a week, we're going to have those weights available, and we'll probably see rapid adoption across providers like Fireworks and Base 10 and other specialized open weight model servers. And you might see a bunch of them pop up on OpenRouter. Right now, you can use it on OpenRouter. It goes to MiniMax and has those same prices. It's also available on OpenCode on the free tier.
On Zen. Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. I got to check that out.
Yeah. So you can play with this today. Your prompts will be logged. You are providing training data. So this is not a zero data retention provider situation, but you can play with the model and understand its capabilities. And that's great. I'm excited for these weights to come out and to have them be served by other providers. I'm excited for where this fits into the ecosystem, where I think one of the interesting things about where MiniMax has been playing is they occupy a part in the niche that is unfilled. You know, there are more powerful models and there are smaller, cheaper open weight models, but they're in this medium place that is very interesting to work with. And it seems like they're edging up in the quality, maybe even like proportionately more than they are in the size. So this is twice as big as M2.7 and it seems to be way more than twice as good as M2.7, given multimodal capabilities, given that context window, and then we can look at all the evals. But I think that on that Pareto frontier of value per price, they're continuing to push the envelope in interesting ways.
I want to wrap up with this blog post from Stackademic where he said, honest verdict, MiniMax M3 is only a few days old. It belongs in the same conversation as Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5. It's a lot cheaper. Is it as good in every single situation? No, but it's in the same ballpark. And that's pretty neat, especially at that pricing. Okay, we need to keep going here. This is, okay, I'm going to switch over to a classic YouTuber, the OG of popular YouTubers, PewDiePie. One of the OGs, maybe there with Casey Neistat. Here we go. This is PewDiePie has just released his vibe-coded open code wrapper that is a complete personal AI productivity suite, including email, docs, and calendar. Top of Hacker News, easily more than 1 million views, 10K stars in a day. If your knowledge work agent startup can't beat PewDiePie, you might as well pack up and go home at this point. His is the benchmark for what you can DIY. So he released this video. His project is finally out. Yeah, this is, what is he calling this? His project. Oh, we had that his video recently.
Yeah. One thing that definitely comes to mind here, oh yeah, is the celebrity factor, right? So if you look at the 10K stars in a day, that isn't necessarily reflective of how amazing this project is. The guy's a celebrity. We saw this recently. I forget who it was, but it was someone who was not from a technical background, and they partnered with some architect who ended up not even being the architect, and it's somebody else ghost wrote the whole thing, and then the whole thing was proven to not even work that well. But the celebrity factor is definitely a thing with hub stars. But I think the whole point here is not so much what he built, but that he built it. That this is not somebody who has a pedigree or a track record as an engineer or an architect, somebody who's very passionate about something. And because they're passionate about it, they did whatever they needed to find a way to make something happen, which is incredibly commendable. And also, as Swix is saying, it's like this raises the bar of what we can expect or what we should expect from people. Okay, if some influencer can put out this kind of a agentic knowledge work suite, like, why can't our engineering team do it?
I would say that this is like the Feastables of code. So Feastables is Mr. Beast's chocolate bar brand. Is it the absolute best chocolate in the world? No, but it's better than a lot of the other stuff. And obviously, if it wasn't connected to Mr. Beast, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. But overall, it's kind of cool that he put out some brand of chocolate that has some ethical standards and not as much sugar. And I think this is like that, right? He's got the celebrity factor, but it is cool in and of itself. I definitely want to check it out, see what he did. I haven't watched his video yet. Let's see, on YouTube, 2.4 million views as of 5 days. That's really impressive. So yeah, I would love to see. I'm going to watch this sometime over the weekend. That's pretty cool. Okay, next, let's see. I think we should do one more and then take a quick break. How are you doing on
Yeah,
bandwidth?
we can cover Cognition, Devon, before it gets too far from Antigravity.
Which one was the Devon headline? Do you want me to share the Cognition.ai? What do you want me to share from them again?
Yeah, so maybe we can just edit this.
Windsurf is now Devon Desktop.
And put it under the same.
All right, you're going to have to talk me through this one. Windsurf is now Devon Desktop. This is from 3 days ago on the Cognition.ai blog. What are we learning about this?
So this is
Devon Desktop, the next generation of Windsurf.
This is an interesting thing for me to stumble into, because I was writing an article that I published a couple of days ago on code intelligence. Really interested in understanding code bases and documenting that understanding. I've been working on a memory system for OpenSymphony and trying to analyze, capture information as something gets built out, and then have that be a part of a memory system that becomes documentation. And I've been trying to draw inspiration from Cognition, because Cognition, in my mind, have been some of the most innovative with DeepWiki, and you will see or generate the most advanced architectural documentation I've seen. It's really powerful. And so they have this, and they also have inside of Windsurf, they had code maps, which is an amazing way to bounce back and forth between an architectural diagram created on the fly based on whatever perspective you prompted. Oh, diagram this thing for me. And then the code where those things are actually implemented. So I've been fascinated by Cognition's work in this area, and I was doing some research in that area, and the model came back with, oh yeah, the former Windsurf stuff that is now in Devon Desktop is interesting. And I'm like, former Windsurf? And this was on June 2nd, right? And yeah, that same day, like hours before, this came out. I'm like, wait, what? Because I was one of the first adopters of Windsurf when they came out, I think in November, like a year and a half ago. I'm still grandfathered into their cheaper plan because of that. And I've been seeing the evolution of them throughout the whole process. And it used to be my main driver. Like when everybody was using Cursor, I was using Windsurf, and I did major projects with Windsurf. I loved the pairing aspect, how they understood the intent behind the engineer that was driving the agent. But I stopped using it because I stopped using IDEs. As I've mentioned, that's like, okay, we're moving into a different paradigm, and everybody is recognizing it. And so Cognition did as well. they've done this brand shift where right now it's kind of the same product, but they've started to rebrand. And so like now it's called Devon Desktop, but it's the same thing. But they are adding this shift where you see the agent command center. When you open it up, you see these two tabs. Okay, do you want to manage agents with a Kanban board? That looks like work orchestration. Or do you want to look at the IDE so you can drop into the code? So they're definitely getting it, and I'm really interested to see, how they're going to continue to unfold in that direction.
Yeah, this is really, I haven't looked at Windsurf in a long time. Went the cursor route for a while, and then before I switched over to all CLI-based stuff. So yeah, this is, I have to check this out again. Let's see, they got the details in the Devon blog, Windsurf's on Devon Desktop. Yeah, a lot there. It's neat that we're constantly reevaluating the shape of what development looks like. And as we're moving like higher up the stack and dealing with agents and how to keep them under control and try to figure out what this is going to look like. And I think that the CLIs are very useful, but then some of the persistent state of IDEs is also useful. So we're going to see. I'm glad that there's now churn in this field because it felt like it was just we just stuck for a while.
Yeah, and I would be really interested in going all in on this if I didn't have other interests as well in developing open source solutions and focusing more on work orchestrated things across providers and harnesses and agents.
It's interesting. I had a friend who worked at Microsoft, and I was he was a bit older than me, and I was a teenager, and I was I grew up in Redmond, right? It's all Microsoft, and I'm like, okay, you got to use Linux, kind of in that like nerdy counterculture. And I was like, imagine if they sold you a car with the hood welded shut. And he's like, I'd love that if they were confident enough to do that. And I always like, I still don't know if I agree with that answer or not, but it did provide me with a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of humans in the loop, and should we look at the code? I do think we got to transition next article. Mira Murati. She's come up on the news again. She wants her AI to keep humans in the loop. Thinking Machines Lab founder, former CTO of OpenAI for a small period of time, says that, let's see, she isn't interested in automating people out of jobs. Instead, she's building AI that can collaborate. So she, I guess, was on this interview, which is kind of like her first public appearance for a while. Let's see, Thinking Machines previewed a new kind of AI model that says it points towards a more human inclusive reality. The company has interaction models which can communicate with the person through camera and microphone. It's not turn-based. You can interrupt it, and it's observing you while you're working on it. What do you think about Thinking Machines? Is this let's see, it says so far the company's only released one product, Tinker, which is refining frontier AI models. But yeah, they've kind of been in like stealth mode for a while. Do you think this is all hype and vaporware, or do you think it's going to go somewhere?
I don't know. I read a while back that there's been a lot of attrition and a lot of the founding team left. So I'm curious about the execution and the thought leadership, how that's going to play out.
I mean, part of me, like when I read this, like we're focusing on human empowerment rather than replace. Like you're kind of telling people what they want to hear, in a sense, and it might be great for getting investment, but maybe this is. I don't know if it's what it's actually going to come up
on
to.
that, I will say that I think there is some interesting potential that is underexplored. Just like we're trying to get inspiration from neuroscience to train AI, and we're like, how can we learn from the amazing human brain? There's ways to do that in the workflow. Like, how can we pair with a human, and how can we have collaboration that is effective? And I think that's vastly under optimized. And so I think that there is something to that. We have this mantra given to us of human out of the loop, and how can we automate things, and how can we create highly autonomous systems. And I think that the way to involve humans is maybe not to have them be in a loop, because then you're a bottleneck. But how can you steer? How can you guide? How can you inspire? How can you transfer some of your intuition and lateral thinking? I think there's a vast underexplored territory there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be something like humans near the loop, but I don't want to be in the loop. And sometimes I wake up and I start up my computer and all my AI agents have been doing nothing since I last left them. That's a waste. They could have been doing stuff. I had to sleep. They didn't. I want to be near the loop. I don't want to be in the loop. I want to be nudging the loop from outside. Okay. I think we have time for, let's see, I'll kill one or two of these stories. I think we'll skip the Instagram security. That's okay. Let's do PNPM. I think that'll be our last one for the day because we've already a bit long in the tooth. Let's just do PNPM. This is interesting. This came up from my own personal work. Should we block flags if we detect that PNPM is executed by an agent? So what this is saying, you have this is showing that agents can work around whatever you do. So what's the broader implications of this? We've seen lots of supply chain attacks recently, and so we want to have policies that you don't necessarily install the newest code, but then if your agent is running it, your agent can get around the policy. So what do you do? My fear is that we have a world where there's a bunch of, CAPTCHAs in place, and we won't be able to automate stuff anymore because some bad things will happen that will lead to stupid restrictions on how long an agent can run or things it has to do.
I think an interesting thing when OpenClaw started to gain traction too was people looking at prompt injection, how can we defend against that and things like that. It's that anything that goes in context is a suggestion. It's like traffic lights in India. I remember being in Mumbai and traffic lights were a suggestion. So you may think that it's a rule. You may think that, oh, I've specified this, therefore it's an instruction that is going to be followed. But if it is in the natural language processing slice of an LLM, it's probabilistic. There's going to be attention to different parts of the context that could be contrary. There could be a temperature issue. In other words, it's not a guarantee. It's not deterministic, and you can't depend on it if that's going to be your guardrail to safeguard your empire. So the main thundering response to this that everybody was centering on was pre-tool use hooks. Pre-tool use hooks are deterministic. It is something that gets fired like before you use a tool like execute shell action or do this operation, and they can refer to commands or filters or scripts that can then detect these kinds of things. Because people are saying like, oh, you just alias your PNPM. But this is something that the LLM can get around with. It's like this life will find a way thing from Jurassic Park. Like the LLMs are extremely creative at circumventing restrictions. So you need to have something outside of the execution path of the LLM that will do a deterministic block for that kind of thing. And that's what pre-tool use hooks seem to be a good fit for.
Yes, what I've done with, for example, GOG or other CLI tools that have carte blanche access is you can write a different CLI tool that only passes through some of it, right? And that way, like if I have, Steven's GOG, where it can use Gmail, but it can't send anything. It can only search, right? Because if I just tell GOG, you can use GOG all you want to, but never send, I cannot be sure that it's going to listen to that. And that is the tricky part with LLMs and with humans, right? Is once you say, please, once you make a promise that future you has to stick by, then you can't override it consistently, right? If you say, don't ever let future me tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to share another meme, I think, to wrap this up. I think this is classic. Okay.
In Paraguay is far hotter. Colder. Coffee in Paraguay.
So in this meme, the idea was Dwight said, do this no matter what. Don't let me break protocol. But then when he wanted to, he has to ask it, break protocol. But he had already given conflicting instructions earlier. And so that's the same issue we face with LLMs is if you say never do this and later you say, oh, I changed my mind, do this. How does it know if it's nefarious or not? So, all right, this has been a good episode. We're going to get this out as soon as we can. As always, thank you for watching. Please follow us on our Trilogy AI Center of Excellence Substack. Follow us on Discord. We've got lots of links here. And on Discord, if there's anything you want us to cover, please ping us there. We'll cover it in the next episode. All right, that's all for this one. Thanks again.
Thank you.